All right, everybody, welcome to BDE Speed Round. We've got a 30 minute clock on us because Kirk's got another call because he's the only important one of the three of us. Mark, lead us off.
I'm going to talk about a couple of what I call have nots and have type of stories from this week, starting off with California and its wonderful refining situation. Apparently, the state, through the California Energy Commission, has been seeking buyers for the Valero refinery in Benicia, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think it's a 145,000 barrel a day refinery. Now, I think there were other searches that preceded this one. Latest word is that they've got an approach to Sinclair, and so Valero, has got plans to just cease operations in 2026 and is contemplating the same at Southern California refinery at Wilmington. And so I think I sent this around to the group as a reap meet sow. And so what refiners are telling you is, along with some other businesses, which, oh, by the way, In-N-Out Burger is moving to Nashville after being in California since its inception in the 40s. But, now we see the state government trying to scramble when faced with a pretty imminent reality of, if these closures happen, you're talking about something approaching 20% of the state's refining capacity. I think the number is 17%. And so, it's certainly not a wonder in a market that's already, I think last I saw, California average gasoline prices were like $4.45. The national average is $3.15. And we've seen excursions to $8 plus in California. Again, we've got very near-term reality kind of hurtling toward us, and now in scramble mode. PSX has got some Phillips 66 has got some evaluations going on around another refinery in the state as well. So that's our first have not topic.
I mean, at the end of the day, what did you expect? I mean, Californians are very smart. Silicon Valley is leading the world in innovation and all these other things. But if you're gonna require a specially formulated gasoline, okay, that's great. Go save the planet, and folks can't make money. Guess what? You're not going to have that gasoline. So anyway, I think it's be careful what you wish for because you just might get it.
I mean, gasoline's almost at $4.50 in California, where the national average is around $3.15. I mean, Milton Friedman called it, when you regulate something out of existence, don't act surprised when it's gone. I mean, it's classic fuck around and find out economics, and they couldn't be any dumber, in my opinion.
I think we're going to see what we're going to see unfold here is some give, if not a total capitulation, on whatever the special stipulations are that are making it unattractive to do business as a refinery in California. The criticality of the issue is just too high, and I don't know if that motivates a wholesale kind of electoral change, but this is another example of you keep getting what you voted for. The Oakland A's moved to Las Vegas because they can get their stuff together around a new site, and just given primarily the municipal and the environmental pushback. Apparently on Benicia, there was a European discussion with a European buyer that apparently was scuttled by the fact that they didn't want to take on some unspecified environmental problem at Benicia. I don't know how old that refinery is. It's pretty old. I mean, I remember back in Exxon days, that was part of the Exxon refining portfolio. But I don't know that there's a refining site in the country that is not going to have some level of remediation that's necessary when you think about shutting down and reclaiming a site that's, been producing refined product for, I don't know, decades, close to a century.
Well, you know what this is pushing us towards? We've jokingly said that the way to really make our case is let's just shut down energy one day. Not produce any electricity, you can't buy any gasoline, you can't use it. And then we'll go, okay, now let's talk. Now that you've lived life without it, and let's have a more reasonable discussion. We have always been the bigger people and said we're not going to do that because lives would actually get lost if ambulances can't run or whatever the case may be. California may be giving us our test case on it that we didn't do. They're doing it to themselves.
I mean, they did elect an Austrian bodybuilder that took steroids as to be governor to clean up the state. So this is only going to create more wacky, results that, I'm just kind of having a blast sitting back and watching this. Back on the remediation, and my the quiet conservative branch of Nantucket, as we're looking at these windmills off the shore, guys are like, oh, they'll take them down. I'm like, once you build them, taking anything apart is liability. And I think that's been one of the biggest energy legal debates is who's responsible when you start doing remediation? Is it the current owner? Is it the past owners? I think the reason why this whole scuttlebutt happened with the European contingency of looking at this refinery was, hey, what liabilities am I inheriting that, if I just run the math and let the finance geeks do a little scenario analysis, they realize that it's underwater. There's no way I can make money on this asset if I'm going to have to pay for the next 100 years of cleanup.
Well, and what's California going to make me do? We don't even know. I mean, some old crusty person at the European refiner looking at this is like, man, Europe's bad enough. Let's not even go deal with California,
The easiest fix is just shut off jet fuel in the state, because all those Silicon Valley and Hollywood nerds that have their private jets would have nowhere to go. And then that changes everything.
The other irony of this is that, the workaround, at least in the short term, is increases waterborne imports into the state. So we can just load up a bunch of product tankers in the Gulf Coast and send them around to California. Oh, wait, we can't because of the Jones Act.
There we go. I love it. We haven't done a finger of the week in a long time, but this is a pretty good one. Hey, take that.
I think you're going to have to, when push comes to shove, I think you're going to have to offer any prospective, assuming operator for any of these refineries, you're going to have to offer some type of blanket indemnification as a start, and probably a lot of other concessions to keep.
Yeah, and how does that work out? How does that work out when the government changes its mind on those indemnifications? Because they're sovereign, so they can't be sued. They can change their mind. But let's stop picking on the Californians. There's another mess on the East Coast. What's happening PJM, Chuck and Mark?
Well, PJM has got just conducted a capacity auction for 26, 27 demand year. And these are designed, to figure out what is it called? Base residual something. BRA is the acronym. And the market cleared for this capacity auction that they had earlier this week at the FERC approved cap, which is $329 a megawatt hour. There were spots like that Northern Virginia Duke corridor where there's the huge concentration of data centers. You had them up in, I think, above 450 a megawatt hour. And really what this is assurances for the modeled forecast of peak demand to make sure that you also have the required reserve margin for those peak scenarios. But since 2007 through 2023, the average bill has gone up, or wholesale prices have gone up 300%. You also had some projects or some generators that were scheduled to mothball or come offline that have since pulled those mothballing applications. And so you're keeping stuff online because of what's coming. You know, they've got another capacity auction coming up in December. And these capacity auctions have been on kind of an annual tenor until now, but you've got, you know, a rapidly changing demand dynamic with a bunch of generation that is in flux, and the amount of demand that's being added at PJM is creating some scenarios that are pretty dire. I read something last week that pointed to durations of blackouts in some scenarios of like 55 hours. And keep in mind, PJM in terms of population it's a 13 state, 67 million person grid in terms of its consumers, its ratepayers. So, you know, we've been picking on ERCOT a little bit here lately. It's just kind of all of a sudden here we are with PJM, and I was pleased to see that the new generation that's been approved that's coming online or is going to have ground broken is, I think, north of 51% net natural gas, and then the single digits for renewables. Of course, that's a bit of a function of geography. In the heart of the Marcellus Shale, the Utica, but also the fact that it's pretty cloudy there a lot of the time.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, when we talk about ERCOT, we always have said ERCOT's a leading indicator, you know, and so problems with ERCOT, it's going to show up other places. The you know, two questions I have for the group. I wrote a white paper back when I was at Stevens in probably 98 or 99, the case for distributed generation. Are we there yet? I mean, are we going to have to start building, you know, behind the grid or off grid solutions for this sort of stuff? And I mean, are economics on a smaller scale where they can compete yet? I don't know that I know the answer to that, but I mean, big, huge, bulky grids. We're starting to see a lot of cracks in it. But at the same time, these are the best grids on the planet, you know, so have we maybe just reached the theoretical limit of what a big grid could do?
Well, of all people, the California utilities and regulatory bodies are actually ahead of everyone and talk about part of the biggest issue is regulatory when it comes to distributed generation. That's the biggest problem is regulatory. How do you price it? How do you settle? I love the idea of distributed generation. It does solve a lot of problems, but it's regulatorily a mess right now because the grid, it's always been centralized production, and you distribute it to the nodes. When you have nodes producing power and you're sending it from nodes to the center and to other places, our grid wasn't designed to do that. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is thinking through how do you actually price, settle. Now there are technologies and people that are ahead of this, but regulatory is the biggest hurdle at this point. Good point, though.
You know, back in the day, the distributed generation clan used to always say, no, that the grid could actually do this if they just allow it to, that the person that operates the wires walks into the regulators and says, hey, the whole grid will just crash, right? Because they gain nothing by doing distributed generation. They lose everything if the grid shuts down, you know, and so it's been Chicken Little, the sky's falling. I'd love to hear a real engineer's take on it, because you've seen some super grid, smart grid technology, software stuff pop up, and I just wonder how real it is. And God, I hate this because I'm a libertarian, but do we need a national commission on it to kind of just dictate to everybody, here's what we're going to do, guys?
I think what you're going to see in the near to medium term, and it's somewhat related to, and I haven't read the details of the executive orders that President signed yesterday on the heels of the AI conference. For 100 megawatts and greater, there's, at least in the headlines, there's permitting and regulatory streamlining. So the incentive to get, fairly large chunks of power online quickly, which is the incentive and the motivation for all the AI data center developers anyway. You look at least some of the anecdotal power purchase agreement pricing that I've heard are, between 10 and 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And I don't know why, as, a competitor in this arms race, you'd want to start out with just the inertial entanglements of being dependent upon the grid. And there's a lot of other external factors that prevent you from doing your own solution. But I think that's where we're headed. And hopefully some of these streamlining actions are real, and we can kind of pave the way for some distributed generation, some off-grid stuff. Because transmission as well is a big problem as we're growing, power consumption and power demand so rapidly relative to the prior, 2 decades where it basically didn't grow at all.
Kirk doesn't like his windmills. People don't like big wires running in their backyard either. So
no doubt. Hey, Trump. I mean, those executive orders. I mean, finally, someone who understands, that we need to actually fast track these power in order to get data centers up and running, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My only challenge, though, is I was trying to think about this because we're always pushing like government's too slow. They get in the way of everything. And I agree with that. But I started thinking about when was the last time government moved really quickly in energy? It was on ethanol mandates. Do you remember this? We ended up with corn in our gas tanks, higher food prices, and engines that run about as well as a golf cart in the surf. So I'm sort of like, wait a minute, we've got there's going to be some unintended consequences that are going to happen because of these executive orders. So just stay tuned. We're going to talk about them on Collide. So we got a lot of stuff to laugh about.
We need Ohio or New Hampshire or maybe South Carolina, because they're the first 3 primaries. They need something energy-wise, and that's how we get the government to move. Because that was all a payoff to the Iowa farmers, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, look, I'm just going to remind you guys. It's something, again, I'm going to bring up Milton Friedman because this is just so good. The government's view of the economy can be summed up in 3 phases. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. If it stops moving, subsidize it. So let's just keep with that in mind. That's our framework today.
I will say, given these have-nots, big, huge opportunity for Texas. ERCOT's sitting there. A lot of these type problems, we're Texans. We understand energy. We should be able to do this. Data centers out in West Texas, there could be worse locations for them.
So while we're arguing here over, refineries, permitting, what's happening in China, Mark?
Well, they just broke ground on what will be the world's largest hydropower facility. It's called help me out here.
Motuo
Hydro.
Motuo means death to America or something, but let's keep going.
It's in Tibet.
Free Tibet.
They're going to do it. Basically going to exceed the 3 gorges, which started in 2012, started generating power in 2012. It's going to be 3 times the size of that. $167 billion. It will consume the steel equivalent of 66 Empire State Buildings. It will use enough cement and concrete to pave a 2-lane road around the equator 4 times, or I just thought an 8-lane Katy freeway once. and it's larger than the entire grid of Poland. Pick a country, right? They're gonna bore multiple tunnels through the mountains that through which this river meanders. I say meanders. It's pretty rushing with a 6,500 foot drop and I think 31 miles. And of course, on the border with India, they're worried about the river changes names when it crosses the border. They're worried about diversion and rivers drying up and all the agricultural impact even further downstream in Bangladesh. But the Chinese are going ahead with this world-class hydro project. And oh, by the way, that's got the capacity to deliver electricity to 300 million people. So 3 times the size of the Three Gorges. I think it's 300 billion kilowatt hours capacity. It's massive.
I'm just thinking that could be the ultimate water slide.
It was approved in
It
was approved in December, and they're breaking ground now.
I mean, it's kind of like they're playing, this whole joke about Trump playing 4D chess. I mean, the Chinese are definitely playing chess and we're playing checkers. I mean, it's almost like they're playing Augusta National while we're stuck on the driving range arguing about club selection. I mean, it's just unbelievable. We're just, man, we're just children playing amongst men.
You can't put a wire there. We got to save the blunt-nosed leopard lizard. So,
no doubt.
That people eat. Nobody out there could even identify a blunt-nosed leopard lizard if we put a photo. Jacob, will you go Google a photo of it and stick it up there? It's not only a stupid creature. It's an ugly creature.
I mean, we're killing the whales while putting in, wind farms offshore. And I mean, no one cares about them. So
real quick, let's do this because we've got one topic that's not on the run of show. Real quick, do I get to spike the football? Have we rolled over in oil production now? Did I call it right?
Well, according to the DOE report yesterday, you were right year over year.
There we go.
Report is down a little over 100,000 barrels a day versus 24. I'd included that as have not number 3. I sent around something, I think, earlier this morning that showed the steep decline in oil-directed rig count, which I characterize as looking like a double black diamond at Telluride.
I mean, that's what's 100,000 barrels a day year over year?
During a deflection moment in a White House press conference yesterday, U.S. production was characterized as "quote unquote" surging.
I mean, it's almost equivalent to losing a medium-sized oil field or a refinery's worth of daily production. I mean, this is a pretty significant trend, not a blip. What say you, Mark?
You can clearly see a plateau if you look at the EIA data on U.S. production on just about any frequency. And so, have we rolled over and are headed down by meaningful chunks? Kind of looks that way, but we'll wait for more confirming and refuting data. We're certainly not surging. I can definitively say that.
Well, and Doug and Chris know in their heart of hearts, and maybe they're not being listened to or whatever. They know at $65 a barrel, tariffs, etc., we're shutting down rigs. We just are. And they know that. And there are a whole host of things that we could be doing potentially on the cost side of the equation to make drilling more profitable so we wouldn't see this drop. But we're not doing that either. And, the hard thing about this is fairly easy to drop rigs. Hey, when's my contract up on the rig? Whatever. Pretty freaking hard to gin it back up. Somebody leaves Midland and goes works a job in construction in Tampa. Hard to get them back.
And you're cutting execution capacity out of organizations. I don't know if you guys saw on the heels of the Chevron Hess merger closing, which we haven't addressed, but I think there were 400 to 500 Houston-based employees. Just your capacity to kind of manage the AFE generation and execution pipeline is not something that you can switch right back on, AI or not. And there's a caution among, particularly on the public side, management teams and boards that don't want to get head faked into committing to a ramp up. And certainly as Diamondback characterized it, said, look, this is 65 is kind of the warm idle position, and we don't start contemplating stepping back on the gas until moving toward the 70s, if not above. It's the volatility that just keeps everything off balance. So directionally, I think we're in that contraction mode, which is starting to show its results in the form of what we're seeing in terms of U.S. oil production.
I mean, the summer usually is lacking news, but what I've heard on today's broadcast is our refineries have stopped moving, our grid is barely moving, our oil production's going backwards. Is it time for subsidies?
When I did the energy policy draft a couple of years ago on Chuck Yates Needs a Job, Brad Olson's policy was just like the old TARP program, the government would loan half of your acquisition costs. So the government will loan at 0% interest half of the cost of drilling each well and eat all the losses on the front end. And so there we go. Drill, baby, drill with U.S. dollars, because nobody prints money like the U.S. government. We got 2 minutes left because Kirk's got to jump. I'm going to cut. Rest in peace, Ozzy Osbourne. I didn't know who Ozzy was, but when Tipper Gore came out and said that we needed record labels on stuff, record labels all over Ozzy. So that's when I figured out I wanted to listen to that. My favorite Ozzy story is he's out on tour with Motley Crue, and Nikki Sixx says Ozzy's a perfect gentleman when Sharon's on tour, tea at 3. Second she leaves, bags of cocaine everywhere, prostitutes, all that stuff. Ozzy's out snorting cocaine by the pool, runs out of cocaine. He then starts snorting ants. He runs out of ants and he urinates on the side of the pool and he snorts his own piss. Nikki's like, this is my hero, this is my idol. So Nikki goes to pee on the side of the pool. Before Nikki can get down to snort his own piss, Ozzy is snorting his piss. And Nikki goes, at that moment, I knew I'd always be an amateur.
So this is great. My friend from Houston is picked up on Jim Rome yesterday on this story. And this is Jim Rome reads his tweet. First from Tim in Houston. First concert ever, 1978, 13 years old, junior high. Opener a band called Van Halen. I'll never understand how I convinced my parents to let me go see a band called Black Sabbath. Just me and a buddy. We were scared to death. Rip Ozzy. I love it. All right, guys. Peace out. Love you guys.
Love you too. Good to see you.
Love you, man.
Peace out.
Cheers.